Welcome, I'm Bill Wake. We're working this week on SortTables, a data analysis tool, and this is my weekly summary of what we've done on Twitch. We're focused on a new screen for the configure database functionality. The old way used an observable model where its children were also observable models, and that really got complex. I've switched to more of a Swift UI friendly one where it's mostly structs, which are immutable objects, and the system detects when you change them and uses that to update things. Last week we did the tables and columns, and this week we're focused on joins. Let's look at the database view model. That's the old model, but it's still being used. Its children are not really active anymore, the tables and joins, but we've still used this to kind of manage the database connections and set up the data for use. I think we'll be getting rid of it in the next week or so, but for now it's here. It formerly had managed when you selected tables or columns or joins, and now we're just having it hold the data, but it gets its data from this config memento, so it can store this on disk using memento as the sort of written format. Codable lets the system convert it to JSON for you. So one thing we noticed in comparing the old approach and the new approach is that the information we hold in the new approach maps pretty well to the config memento. So rather than try and convert to the database view model directly, we make sure that we can write to the config memento and then reconstitute a database view model from that. So with these pieces in place, we've used that sort of pipeline or kind of narrowing approach so that we can be relatively independent of the actual database view model. Last week, we did most of the table-related information. This week, we're focused on the joins. One of the things we did this week was add an open database button at the bottom of the window, always visible, rather than hidden away, to help the user interface be a little smoother. And then the end of the day on Monday, we added this new structure for joins. So a join in SQL, you can say, this table dot that table equals another table dot another column. And that tells it to connect those two tables and use them jointly together. We're just using simple inner joins for what we do. There are more complicated ones, and there's workarounds we have. All right, but anyway, we just created the objects to start with. A join contains two column references, and I've called those scoped columns. That's the table one dot field equals table two dot field or column, and we can look at those as well. They're just the table and the column name, and then it prints out as table dot column. Otherwise, it's comparable, and it's just a tiny little helper object. So with those in place on Monday, Tuesday we started trying to connect things to the view. So that's to create this screen. Well, this piece of it, the add join. There's an all joins view and a button that says add a join. Okay, and when you click the button, we go into this all joins view. It just takes all the joins we've accumulated and prints them, just shows them one at a time and lets you delete them if you want. All right, and so the list of these, if I make a couple, that list is shown by the all joins view, and then each individual line is shown by one join view, which is a column selector, a scoped column selector, this drop down basically, and an equal sign, and then the second column selector. So we get that style, like registration.person fk equals person.id. Okay, so that would be a very natural join in this database. But the nice thing with this struct approach is we use the binding, and we can kind of pass those down and then modify them inside and pass it, it automatically passes back. And the syntax here, $join, that says that entity can be modified. It's a two-way connection. The column selector is a picker, or this little drop-down list, and we just run through all the choices, and whatever you're done, you mark your selection as selected, and that works its way back up to the display, and the display redraws, and everything is good. Well, one thing in this was a little tricky, and we spent some time, Tuesday and Wednesday, trying to get this right. But the the component for a picker has its own notions about what color it should draw things, and it was drawn in a super light gray that I just hardly could read, kind of like you see up there. I probably should do the same change there. That light gray just looks disabled, and it's light on white is not a very good experience, especially with my eyes. It took a little work to get a variation of this that would draw it with a black text color, because it's not something they allow you to change naturally. So we had to play around a little to get there. One of the things that we did in this thing connecting the view down all the way, we hadn't used a binding at the bottom level. So we fixed that so that changes at the bottom work their way all the way up to the top of the view. Once you have the selected joins, we need to accumulate that into the database view model so it can be used to compute the data. So that gets done in here. We make sure we write the joins into the configuration memento. So database selection has 2 memento, and down here it computes the active joins. Once we have these displaying, we need to make sure they show up in the database view model so it controls what data gets done. It's really just an addition to 2 memento, now has to include the joins. It maps the table.column equals table.column. It actually has to get an index, not a name, so it took a little doing to get that, but not bad. All right, and finally, the Thursday, we worked on cleaning up. So we noticed one thing was joins only work if the join table is included. So here I've got class, person, and registration, and the thing I'm setting up here, person ID, I would probably do this one, class equals class ID, and this way we tie people into classes. Basically, it's students in classes. And when you show that, you probably don't want to see the ID or the instructor foreign key, same in person, and you don't really want to see this registration table at all. Well, we had written out the tables being used, but we went through and asked them, are you used or not? We didn't consider the fact that you might have a table that's being used in a join, but you don't want to see the contents of its columns. So we had to do a little fiddling around today to make sure that we took the tables that are visible or the ones that participate in a join. And when you do that, the join takes effect. So we only wanted 4 columns to show. We can see, well, we can get basically a class roster. If I can do this. So with, sort the other way. All right, so here's a class 28 tone rows, 1 student, 6th grade and 88 has 4 students, and so on. So we got the data we wanted, and it's matched up students to classes. And that's a nice step for us, that replicates much of what the old interface did. The one thing we don't handle is renames, and I want to get back to those, but for now, that's a good place to be. In terms of the code, the real big thing left open is database selection versus database view model. So the selection knows the database name, what tables you've selected, what joins you have, and that's really the same information we're passing in the config memento. So in that sense, the database view model is just a variant of that. While it stores active tables and active joins, they're not really being used. So all that happens with them now is when you read database config memento, either reading it from a file or getting it passed in from our database selection, it reconstitutes those tables and basically fills them with exactly the contents that we had on the database selection side. There's no more editing them. The views for those are gone. We took those out today. And so add table and add join just don't even make sense in the context of what we have left. It really is just a bag holding these collections that are held in this other set of fields. We are trying to eliminate this class, or at least reduce it substantially. And a lot of what we did today was trying to understand what pieces can go and how much do we need them and so on. So for the most part, I think what we've come to understand is The real place where this shows up is that it creates what's known as the working schema, and the working schema is the data structure needed on the sort tables side itself. So the sort tables can work with either in-memory like flat files, or it can work with the databases that we're configuring. Once we get it down to a working schema, the system that deals with the sorting and all that doesn't know anything about databases. It just knows these are the columns you're working with. How the query gets turned into a database query, well, that does depend on the database. So the working schema, it really is producing something about working tables and working joins, and it's basically mapping the active table tables into working tables, and similarly active joins into working joins. Well, again, that's actually exactly the information we have on the database selection side. So we're slowly moving pieces in so that the database selection can take over this part. And I think that will happen next week, I expect. It'll let us eliminate several objects. And in particular, let's see if I can find that. Let me get to the active table as an example. Active joins has a similar problem, but they both have this kind of boilerplate cancelables. I'm an observable object, and I've got cancelables because I need to notify listeners that I've changed. And the reason I need to do this is because this is the deal of the model being multiple layers deep. It happens almost for free with structs. Now that I understand it better, I can use them. But it requires some work for us that we, when you append something to a table, you have to notify the listeners that you're changing this object and so on. We don't need that kind of boilerplate. That's what the framework's supposed to give us. So I guess I don't know why you can't do this sort of thing very easily, but you can't. There is a way, but you can't get it for free. Whereas for structs you do. We'll see. I mean, there's a new model out in the last year, and I haven't used that one really, so we'll find out if that does a better job with the models and how that fits together. But not this project. We're still working with UIKit as well as Swift UI, and the UIKit piece can't go away just yet. I hope in the next year or two maybe it can, but we'll see. Because we made these joins working, we had to make sure that the join table is included regardless of whether it was visible or not. We got that working. We removed some old views, and now we're positioned for the work next week to continue trying to reduce the need for this database view model, and I feel like we're close. All right, well, thanks for joining. We meet Monday through Thursdays, 2 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, or 7 to 9:30 p.m. UTC, and I'd love to have you join us. Thanks. Bye-bye.